Have you ever had a video game that you played when you were younger that for some reason or other you just couldn't get into? It was either wrong place, wrong time, it wasn't quite hitting your tastes at the time, or maybe you were just too young to really appreciate what it was doing. Well, that's not the case with today's game, because I'm replaying it nearly 15 years later and I still don't like it. My name is St. Corvus, and this is my review of Gears of War Reloaded. If you grew up in the same generation that I did, it's impossible to not recognize the name Gears of War. Back in the Xbox 360 days, it was one of Xbox's biggest series, being up there alongside Halo and Forza. Gears of War managed to fully carve out its own niche though, with its signature cover-based third-person shooter action that pioneered the genre for many years to come, a campaign that players loved, and multiplayer modes that were different and unique from what other shooters like Halo and Call of Duty offered. It might come as a bit of a shock to you that I've never really been a fan of this monolithic entity in Xbox's catalogue. I was never much of an Xbox guy growing up, but we did have one in the house, so when I was in high school, a friend of mine let me borrow his copy of the game, and over a weekend I played and finished it, and just never went on to play another in the series. I've been a little bored lately and wanted a mindless shooter to play, and saw that Gears of War Reloaded had been released on Steam and was a more modern remaster of the original game, and thought maybe this time it would finally click with me. Let's go part by part and see exactly why that didn't happen. 14 years ago, on a planet not so different from Earth, a mutated reptilian humanoid race called Locusts emerged and declared war on humanity, wiping out majority of the species. Here you play as Marcus Phoenix, disgraced soldier or Gear of the remnants of the world government. After being pardoned and released from jail by his longtime friend and comrade Dom, Marcus joins and leads Delta Team made up of himself, Dom Santiago, Damon Baird, and former pro athlete the Coltrane. In a last-ditch effort to destroy the Locusts where they nest, Marcus will take Delta Team all across a ruined and destroyed city and surrounding areas to plant a resonator that will map out the Locust Caves. Being a game originally from 2006, Gears of War is almost entirely your stereotypical 2000s military shooter when it comes to the story here. You have the over-the-top burly military guys with deep voices who shout and grunt a lot, a hell of a lot of gunfights and calling command to get tactical advice, and very little in the way of who these characters are or what they're about. We start off the game being released from prison, yet the crimes which Marcus has previously committed seem to never be explained over the course of the game. We also have a full squad of unique characters, but there's not a single line of dialogue that I could point to and say served as character development. These characters are meant to be manly military men, and that's pretty much all they'll be from start to finish here. I was hoping that as the game went on, I'd get a little peek behind the curtain of who these characters really are, and I did come out disappointed, but I understand that this game was going for a very particular kind of vibe that was really common at the time, and I'm sure that the characters being so simple and straightforward was part of the appeal for so much of the game's audience back in the day. There were still some aspects to the story that I did like. For a story this gruff and serious, I did really appreciate that the setting wasn't literally just Earth, and that the planet the game was set on, named Serra, actually had both unique architecture and human culture alongside unique parts of its ecosystem. Enough of the setting was different for me to be genuinely intrigued, and I want to see more of this world in further games. I did also like that even if we don't get to see or hear a lot about the team members' history, it definitely comes across that there is a bit of a shared history there, and that these characters have known each other for quite a long time. As far as the story goes, I do think that there is potential for growth down the line in the series. The game's writing and character work is a little bare in this first game, but I see the potential for later games to go a lot further with it. Gears of War sets up an okay foundation for its characters and setting, but doesn't really deliver in this game alone. The story isn't really going to be what you're coming to this game for, so let's move on to the gameplay. As I mentioned earlier, Gears of War was one of the games that pioneered the third-person cover shooter genre that lasted for so many years. If you're not familiar with what that means, basically combat comes down to finding the nearest part of conveniently waist-high cover, hitting the cover button to hide behind it, and peeking out or above it to shoot at your enemies. It's a very simple way to execute third-person shooter combat without having brain-dead AI for enemies or crazy movement options, and it does work quite well, albeit not being the most exciting shooter combat in the world. The trick to playing well in a game with this style of combat is to always pick the best angle that gives you a wide view of your enemies while not letting them have a clear shot at your sides or back. It might sound like that means you'll be switching your cover spot constantly to keep a good angle that'll protect you, but chances are you won't really have to. If your playthrough is anything like mine, then the locusts you'll fight throughout the game are going to have such brain-dead AI that you're just going to be able to pick one spot in an encounter and just stay there until the fight is over. And that's even if the enemy bothers to shoot at you and not just stand in one spot doing nothing. As the locusts are an enemy force that dwell in the planet's underground, they will spawn through multiple different tunnels they dig up as the fights go on, which might make you have to adjust on the fly. But whenever a new one occurs or any event happens over the course of the story, a button prompt will come up to shift the camera to focus on it. In a game like this, where gameplay and combat are the biggest focus, I'd love to say that you have a whole arsenal of weapons on offer, but that's not really the case. Don't get me wrong, there is variety here in what weapons you have and how you want to fight your battles, but not as much as I would have imagined. You have 2 primary weapon slots, with options ranging from a standard assault rifle, to a shotgun, a sniper, grenade launcher, and 1 or 2 other weapons, but that's about all. You have a handgun as a permanent option and also grenades that you can use, but there's not as much variety when it comes to these. I did find the grenades to be quite effective in my playthrough though. I'm not usually someone that likes to use them in my shooters, but the grenades were powerful and relatively plentiful even if they take too long to throw. There's also a melee attack that you can perform, and the signature assault rifle actually has a chainsaw attached which ends up working as an execution style melee move. I've always known that the chainsaw was a beloved weapon of the Gears community, so I was keen to use it, but to be honest, I just did not like using it in this game. I'd be there with an enemy jumping all around me and I'm mashing the melee button, but Marcus seemed largely unresponsive. After dying a few too many times to this, I mostly swore off melee combat for the rest of the game. Other than the focus on the cover-based shooting, the other main thing that defines Gears of War is its active reload system, which I can say makes for a pretty cool feature. Anyone watching this video will be familiar with the concept of reloading a gun in a game, but Gears of War changes that basic system in a way that I'd not seen before until this game. During your reload animation with any weapon, a little bar pops up on the screen with different sections in it. Time a button press in the small perfect timing section and your weapon will fully reload instantly with extra ammo. Time it in the good section and your reload is simply faster, but miss the good timing sections altogether and you're going to have to stand there and live out the full slow reload time. This system works really well because you have to be paying attention to this while in the middle of firefights and while making sure you're not getting flanked. Do you reload a little early and make sure you get the timing down, or try and kill that extra locust but possibly run out of ammo in a bad spot? It leaves the player with minor choices in minute-to-minute gameplay, and I did really enjoy that. The only other aspect to talk about when it comes to the gameplay is the movement, which I can say is very solid and bulky whether you like it or not. Marcus Phoenix and crew are some very bulky, burly military men, and the game does very much succeed at conveying that with how the game controls. Movement is not the most fluid. Your regular walk is quite slow, but you do have a sprint that you can do by holding down the cover button. The sprint does lock you in your direction too much for my liking, and I hated that Marcus would sometimes just end up automatically crouching behind cover when I was just trying to sprint through a room. If I have to give anyone playing this game a tip, it's to go into your settings before you ever start a new game and make sure you turn the camera shake off. I had it on for the first hour of my playthrough and I was feeling queasy during regular movement, but it got even worse when I was sprinting. I never get motion sickness with games, but the camera shake here was just awful. There's not much else to the story mode here other than there being one type of collectible that you can find as you play through it, and these are the cog tags of fallen soldiers. Picking these up actually unlocks pages from comic books that were published back in the day to expand on the lore of the game by DC Comics and some other companies. I think that this is actually such a cool and fun type of auxiliary content to unlock in a game. While I never hold my hopes up for comics based on video games, I am genuinely excited to read these, and with the reward being something I found to be so cool, I kept my eye out for as many of the cog tags as I could. It could very well be that these comics flesh out the parts that I felt were lacking in the story section of my critique, but even if they do, I still have to judge the game's campaign alone for what it is. There is online co-op for the campaign here, which is cool, but there's no split screen option at all, which I was quite disappointed about. I'm on the hunt for as many fun co-op games as possible at the moment, and a majority of great co-op games have the option of a friends pass if the multiplayer is online only, yet this doesn't offer that either. The only way that I'd be able to play this with a potential partner of mine or friend is for them to also buy the game themselves, and for a 5 to 6 hour campaign, I'm just not going to make them do that. For the last thing to mention about the gameplay, yes, there is a full multiplayer suite on offer, but this review and my channel in general mostly just focuses on single player games and game campaigns, so I won't be playing or reviewing the multiplayer component here. It's just not what I'm interested in, and I honestly don't love the gameplay enough as it is to want to take that further into multiplayer. I can, however, talk about the design of the game. Gears of War Reloaded is a bit of a mixed bag here when it comes to the design, but I don't actually dislike it as much as I thought I would. Speaking on the visuals first and foremost, Reloaded here is a 2025 re-release based on the Ultimate Edition which came out in 2015, so the graphical fidelity is the same as that release. The graphical fidelity definitely isn't ugly, but I think the mix of Xbox One era graphics with 360 era art styles can end up looking a little off. The art style of Gears of War is very much of its time, with the colour scheme being almost entirely greys and browns and levels that are majority just half-destroyed buildings. The game ends up with a look that is simple but detailed, and I think that these visuals will age a lot more gracefully than the original Xbox 360 visuals. Character designs are where the game is a miss for me, however. Each member of Delta Squad does have their own unique appearance, but they all just look like some guy rather than having a fun identity. The Locusts themselves are also too much of a humanoid enemy type for me to really fall in love with. I would have loved if they looked a little more reptilian or even bug-like, but they just kinda end up looking like monster humans, and different types of Locusts can have some cool armors, but otherwise all look too similar. I do think that the big bad of the game has a really cool design, I just wish we got to see more of it. Sound is one of the major aspects that I do have to make some points on when it comes to the design of the game. All of the sound effects in the game, such as weapons firing, environmental effects, explosions and other noises all sound great and satisfying. The voice acting is well done, if not a bit on the cheesy side, but by the end of the game, I still couldn't unhear Marcus Phoenix being Jake the Dog and Bender. The soundtrack is where my contention lies when it comes to the sound. For a game that is so serious and focused on military men doing military things, the soundtrack is very oddly whimsical and really took me out of the experience at times. The soundtrack feels like it would fit into a fantasy game, whereas Gears of War is a military action game with some slight sci-fi tones. I'm not going to say the soundtrack was bad, I didn't find it particularly noteworthy, but it really did not fit this game at all. If the story had a little more personality and character or some slightly more outlandish concepts, then perhaps it would fit the game better, but as it is, you can very easily tell that the tone does not match. That's about it for the design, it's time to move on to the conclusion of the review. All in all, I didn't fall in love with Gears of War when I was a teenager on the Xbox 360, and I didn't fall in love with the Reloaded version here either. I do see there being potential for this to just be a straightforward intro to the series, and the subsequent games getting into a lot of my complaints like the Halo series does, but I have to rate this game on its own, and without PC versions of Gears 2, 3 or Judgment, I don't actually have a way to play those entries. Gears of War Reloaded does have some things that it does well, such as the active reload system, a cool setting, fun weapons, and good sound design, but it does really show its age as a visually and technically improved remaster of an Xbox 360 game. Its short length, incredibly linear design, lack of character work, simple story, and ill-fitting soundtrack stop the game from being one that I can recommend to everyone. I'd say that this is only really worth playing if you really want to get into the Gears of War series, or you really just love third-person shooters and want a chill game to play for a weekend. Today, I'll be giving Gears of War Reloaded a score of 6.5 out of 10. I can't say that I'm a Gears of War fan, but I am at the point where if Microsoft released a PC version of the second game on Steam, I would actually play through it to see whether it is a major improvement or not. That's going to be all for the review today. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my future reviews. Thanks for watching, guys. See ya.